Today on the show, I'm delighted to be joined by Neji Isaac, the Global Category Manager at Nova Chemicals. I met Neji at the Supply Chain Canada event that I attended in Calgary, Canada, earlier in the summer. And following our conversation, I invited him to join me on the show to chat about his recently completed doctorate in supply chain and an interesting case study that formed part of his thesis. So with that said, Neji, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Philip.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. The first thing that I always ask of our guests on the show is, did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
That's an interesting question to start with. You're talking to somebody who started as an apprentice aircraft engineer at Singapore
Mhm.
Airlines. Uh, One conversation with one of the senior leaders there, I was having a coffee chat, and after a while, he asked me, "Neji, do you want to try procurement?" And guess what my answer would be? What is
Okay.
procurement?
Shrink the shoulders.
What is procurement? So from there, 2 decades later, and like 7 countries, I'm still loving it, which means procurement definitely found me.
Yeah. I actually want to ask you about the 7 countries because you have lived and you've worked all around the world. And we were speaking a little bit before we hit the record button about
Yeah,
just kind of working cross cultures. But I wonder if there's anything that you could share, from your experiences of kind of working across different cultures that has um, influenced the way that you kind of work on a day-to-day basis.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, most of my, I mean, it was equally split, I would say, like some part in Southeast Asia, Europe, Middle East, and US and
Yeah.
North America, I would say.
Yeah.
So not everything that is written on a contract is interpreted the same way. I'm
Hmm.
just putting that for the way of putting it
Yeah.
from a supply chain standpoint. There are countries that I've worked where a handshake is everything. That's the word, and like you don't necessarily need to see the paper, meaning on the paper to believe that.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest, I think, takeaway for me was my humbling experience of having gone through different countries. So I'll give you a simple example of process and system implementations. Um, Back in 2000, early 2000s, Southeast Asia was going through SAP transformation.
Yeah.
And we in North America, we didn't start it until 2010s,
Hmm.
right? So it is a way of thinking that, oh my God, okay, what we thought um, low cost countries or high growth
Yeah.
regions are way ahead of us in many other ways, right? So that gives us the opportunity to think otherwise. And maybe one more thing to add is the level of interaction, human interaction, right? So that varies in different places, and where I've seen more collaboration, I've seen more success.
Hmm. That's interesting. The first point, it makes me think, just don't assume. Don't assume that, as you're working in one location,
Mm,
you don't assume what it's going to be like in the other location that you're partnering with, or that you're working with, or that your colleagues are based on, because you just can't. That those assumptions have got a good chance of being incorrect.
that is 100% true. Like you'll be baffled to see some other places which we might think that, oh, they were not up to par, but they are.
Well, I want to switch to talking about your doctorate in supply chain. So first of all, congratulations. I think this
Thank you.
summer you were finalizing and finally completed it, between when we last spoke
Right.
and recording today. And I just wonder what made you decide to pursue that in the first place.
There's a story behind it, actually. It was that story is not academic though. Don't confuse me for an academic. I am not an academic.
Mhm.
So I'm somebody who with the mindset that the future generation of supply chain professionals shouldn't go through the same struggles that we went through.
Mhm.
So what started us? I used to take, for lack of better terms, take a record of my lessons learned from all the projects that I've been and all the countries and companies that I've worked for.
Yeah.
Again, when you talk about companies, it's ranging between 55,000 employees to 50 employees, right? So it's different. The challenges are different. So I was trying to prepare that into a form of a handbook,
Hmm.
more or less. But a couple of years ago, I took it to my mentors. Some of them even chaired ISMs. So um, they were the one who gave me the idea. Okay, Neji, you're doing a lot of research. You did a lot of literature review. Like,
Yeah.
if you've done that, like, why are you not pursuing it in the format of a thesis?
Mhm.
That gave me the idea, and that's where I started. But once they pulled my leg actually. Once I dive into, oh my God, yeah, I would regret many times, like, when you go through the research, but I'm fortunate that I was able to successfully complete it, and I strongly believe that it brings value for
Mhm.
the next generation of procurement professionals.
Maybe just a little bit more involved than you thought it was when you're starting it, by the sounds of
That
it.
that Not a little bit, like a lot more.
Well, one of the things that I know you used, as part of the basis of your thesis was, with you kind of talked about supplier relationships and you kind of rethinking how we engage with suppliers as kind of the overview. But
Yeah,
you had a case study, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, around the crane services category. It's always interesting, I find, when we as a procurement community talk about the things that we buy
right.
such random things,
Yeah,
which is actually what makes it so interesting. When you go into things that you never grew up thinking you're going to be an expert in buying, X, Y, and Z, but here you are. But you talked about this crane services case studies that you did. Can you just talk a little bit about, first of all, what it was that you were buying, and then the status of the category and the relationships within the category when you found it?
sure. Before I go into that, with one comment or one sentence you just said, you would be really surprised to the things that you buy.
Mm.
When you really get into procurement. I once worked for an organization who was the primary supply company for Canadian and U.S. military.
Right.
So every day you would see a variety of items that is being procured, and which in your wildest dream would have never thought about.
No. I,
And you would have a different appreciation for the people who are actually at the end of the stick, for lack of better terms, right? So
I know I'm going kind of
yeah,
continuing that thread, but I
yeah,
think that's one of the things that makes it really interesting. And also, when you think about skill set,
yeah,
why so much of what we do is based around kind of a transferable skill set that you can take from one category to the next. It's not
correct,
necessarily building a deep domain subject matter expertise in a particular category because we have other people in the business that are paid to be those experts. But it's,
exactly.
how do we get the most out of those experts by applying
Mhm.
more transferable skills? And, I had such a range as well from, one minute you're buying things for automotive interiors, the next minute you're buying Montessori childcare, and, the
Right,
next minute you're
right.
buying something else completely random. But that's one of the things that keeps it interesting, I think.
That is so true, so true. Yeah, I mean, I was going from anywhere from the range between urinary devices to books for UN.
Right.
That's what military used to, and everything in between, and
Yeah.
ammunition and things like that. But that's a different ball game. Coming back to your question on crane services, so that category. How did I find that category? That category was okay. Maybe I'll take a step back and say
Yeah.
every time when you analyze the metadata for your procurement organization, I try my best and encourage my team to try their best to look at from a project standpoint,
Mhm.
right? So what falls under the strategic bucket, what falls under the routine bucket, and tactical
Yeah.
in those sense, right? So um, the crane services at that time was very strategic, but was on the level of stagnancy because there isn't much you can do.
Mhm.
Like, it was cranes that you procured for the day-to-day activities at a petrochemical facility, and along with the cranes came, crane operators and the maintenance of the cranes as well. It was a bigger category, not the top one or two, but but on the
Still of
higher spend
strategic
side.
importance.
Correct. And the relationship with them from a contractual standpoint, we had around 18 plus years of contracts that was either a renewed or replaced with newer language as the language came out.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a philosophy here. I normally talk about companies who say like, oh, we have reached some sustained level of stagnancy. There's no stagnancy. It's either A, you are a growing company, or B, you're a dying company. There's
Mhm.
no stagnant company. Same with supplier relationship. There's no stagnancy in a supplier relationship. Continuous improvement is the basis for that,
Okay.
right? Um, so again, that was the stage of that.
That's a
You know,
very
that, that
interesting way of putting
relationship.
it.
Yeah,
That yeah, a relationship is either growing or it's dying, and there is no in
exactly,
between. And if you
exactly.
probably think you're in between, it means it's dying.
That is true. That is what. Yeah, exactly what I meant. Yeah. So that was the stage of that contract or that relationship when
And
I found it. Yeah.
so why did you focus, or why did you choose that for closer analysis as part of your thesis?
Yeah. So for part of my thesis. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's definitely based on the outcome of what we
Yeah.
were able to achieve. And I have to give a lot of credit to my team there. When I did it, I'm not taking it all by myself. I just want to put it on record and kudos to my team. But when I looked at it, thinking from a strategic standpoint, a continuous improvement standpoint, what we did is we did an analysis of the company itself.
Okay.
So what matters the most is, or two things I would say. One is supply position, and two is suppliers' preferences.
Mm.
So any organization, any supply chain organization who looks at um, the the categories from that lens, what's the supply position and what's supplier preferences, then you will be able to. I can guarantee that you will be able to find alternate solutions or continuous improvement ideas
Yeah.
out of that. So when we looked at it, what we realized was that geographically speaking, the supplier that who was supplying us with these grains, they are the main supplier for many of the other facilities nearby.
Mhm.
So I can say like within the heartland region, I would say.
Yeah.
So they utilized the same company for their crane service needs. And again, us being part of the extended leadership team at that company, I was able to know that we have property that are not being utilized. And where it all happened is when you analyzed the spend. That's where I want to start with my kudos to my team. When they analyzed the spend, 33% of the spend that we had with this company fall under mobilization and demobilization,
Mhm.
which is quite a significant chunk. And if somebody in Europe is listening to this, they might go crazy because in Europe you would find supplier villages.
Yeah.
So normally, when you have larger chemical or petrochemical or oil and gas facilities, you will have suppliers tents, for lack of better terms, nearby that facility, and
Mhm.
you'll get items on procurable stuff from there, but not so much in North America, not so
Mhm.
much in Canada, and especially in Alberta. So that's therefore the spend on mobilization and demobilization was such higher. And once I understood what was happening, regionally, um, and with my understanding of our real estate,
Yeah.
I proposed a solution actually. So and that solution become quite a hit
Mhm.
for both parties, financially and from an efficiency standpoint.
So you looked at this as not okay, let's try and leverage the market to see what other alternatives we can bring and kind of traditional cost down levers. Perhaps it's a world where, because you said that this provider is pretty dominant in that local geographic area, there's maybe a monopolistic situation going on where it's hard to bring others in. So it's how do we look for points of value that we can offer them for something in return that lands with a win-win.
That is true. I would with one correction on like the win-win stage.
Mm.
I'm not debating you on the win-win, but I normally tell people that I'm not so much of a win-win person. I'm
Mhm.
a we-win person because
Yeah.
in a win-win, one party wins first.
Yeah.
In a we win together, right?
Yeah.
So uh, that was my approach,
Mhm.
and uh, I can talk about the solution also because
Yeah, I'd love to know kind of how you one kind of the solution you came up with, but then also the process that you went through with the
right.
supplier to
Yeah.
get to a point where that was a solution that worked for everybody.
Right. So again, as you mentioned, when you are in situations where you're with a monopolistic supplier, or I would say in most cases somebody like sole supplier kind of
Yeah.
deal, right? I mean, if you're talking about software solutions,
Yeah.
there isn't much options that you have.
Yeah. You built your own monopoly just because of who you've sourced.
Exactly. So keeping that in mind, that's where you never approach a supplier or a supply category with the mindset of like, okay, how do I beat down the supplier?
Mhm.
How do I get more out for me? How can we get more out
Yeah.
of it, right? So my solution to that was based on our availability of real estate. We proposed a solution that okay, you can store like the crane company can store all of our highly utilized cranes or
Mhm.
heavily utilized cranes on site, uh, plus any other cranes that you would like to store. But the only
Mhm.
caveat is you will be priming off that area and you will treat it as that you're on land because when you
Yeah.
once you prime off, then any incidents would not fall under us on them, right? So um, and therefore we can get rid of our 33% mob demob cost
Mhm.
and increase their profitability as well at the same time because they will be sending the cranes from to other facilities
Yeah.
from really nearby facility, but they don't but they can
It
still get
reduces their transportation costs.
yeah, but
For
they
that.
can still get the mob demob from
Yeah.
other companies.
Yeah.
um Again, that was the solution, and it was really successful. And one caveat that we left is that purposefully left is that we're not charging them for any lease or
Mhm.
a land lease or anything like that because that wouldn't be fair. But down the road, uh, there is a possibility as
Yeah,
well.
but you get the benefit from the, essentially a 33% reduction in cost because
Absolutely,
you're just
absolutely.
wiping those costs, away,
Yeah,
overnight.
I'm talking about an $8 million spend.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it
Um,
was significant.
and if the land is not doing anything, then, why not utilize it in that way? Now, how how did you approach that internally? Because that's a little bit of a mindset shift, I'm sure, internally
Yeah.
of kind of utilization of that land and, um, and essentially providing a no cost lease to your supplier for that land.
So I have to tell you, like many facilities have free land, but sometimes it can be outside the battery limit, and then
Yeah.
that doesn't really help. In our case, there used to be a couple of vinyl plants that were standing in that land,
Hmm.
so we know for a fact that okay, that was demolished and
Yeah.
that land is not being used. So we have something called supply management action team. So that's a core leadership team that we internally have where we propose new ideas, right?
Hmm.
So that's where I proposed this idea, and it wasn't all smooth, but when you come with facts and factors that is going to affect us for better efficiency, I think people will have more chance of accepting
Yeah.
it. Uh, Plus, also one thing that I've utilized from a business standpoint is finding a change agent.
Yeah.
You always need to find somebody who's going to stand by your side and who's not somebody who's going to say change is good, you go first. No,
Hmm.
so that makes sense. So you need to find that person. So and I did a team approach, and obviously my mentors, my senior leaders, they supported me with that. And all we had to the other two stakeholder group was one was real estate and one was finance
Yeah.
that they brought into it. And yeah, that's how we were able to get it.
How was it an easy sell to your provider? or because on one hand it seems like a no-brainer, but on the other hand, they're giving up 33% of what is in their in their books from a sales perspective, and oftentimes sales revenue is recognized in a very different way than the money that they're saving by having access to this land.
That is true. That is true. But um, when I proposed it to the senior VP of the cranes company, um, it was not like, hey, we got something we want, right?
Mhm.
But I had to explain it in such a way that we both win, right?
Yeah.
So even though their sales revenue with one company has
Yeah.
gone down in that region,
Yeah.
their profitability
Right.
has reached a different level
Yeah.
because I'm talking about one company here, but there were two other oil and gas and three other two one mining and two ag companies nearby who was
Yeah.
using them. So their profitability went quite more than what they have lost in sales.
Um, when you think about, because I love examples of thinking outside the box. I
Yeah,
had something very, it's funny when we're talking about categories. I had something similar when I had responsibility for childcare back in the day, where we wanted to bring in a childcare provider for a headquarters. This is pharmaceutical,
uh-huh.
and we had no money to pay for the services, but we had a building on site, and
Right.
so we gave them that building, and then they could use that building as their flagship to then basically bring all the other, because they wanted to establish a foothold in the UK market. Then
Yeah,
they could use that when they want to do tours and to help grow their business in the UK. And it feels like in some ways certain circumstances have to be present for something like that to be possible. But on the other hand, I think that you can probably find interesting and innovative ways across most categories to come up with solutions that are beyond kind of the obvious. And I always felt like, um, one, you don't know if you don't ask. And two, we talked about don't make assumptions before, interestingly, from a cultural perspective, but don't make assumptions about what's important for the supplier. Because
correct.
we know I was brought up thinking, the only thing that matters to a supplier is how much money they make from me. And that's not necessarily the only thing that matters to a supplier. But if you go in like that, then you end up with these kind of zero sum battles around price.
That is a whole different hour of conversation if you want to start that. Talking about money and beating down suppliers. No, you're right. I mean, so the two things that you actually mentioned, one, the opportunity, sometimes the opportunity presents itself, but it's actually recognizing that as an opportunity.
Yeah,
That's where the mindset shift needs to
yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Um, and looking at it from you can look at it from a category by category perspective or a supplier by supplier perspective, and
Yeah.
think about what are things beyond the guarantee of my order that I have that are of value to my supplier partners. And therefore, what value can we ascertain to that might help me get something in return for it?
Right. Right. No, absolutely. I, I, yeah, it's about like, going back and thinking about like, aggressive cost saving measures, right?
Yeah,
If you beat down suppliers. So this is one thing when I teach, I tell my students that, okay, always think that innovation is not just the monopoly of the owner operator.
yeah,
What I mean by that is, when you beat down a supplier, they innovate too. When they are innovating, we won't be invited on that train.
yeah,
We don't want that to happen.
yeah. No, and I'm a firm believer of that, and that innovation can come in any category as well. So
Absolutely.
so many
Yeah.
times we look and say, I'm not really going to focus much time on that category because it's non-strategic. Every
Right.
category is strategic in some way, shape, or form. Now, some may be more than others, but that doesn't necessarily discount certain categories when you're looking for opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I cannot agree more with that. Yeah.
Well, it's about time for us to wrap up today. So I want to thank you so much, Neji, for sharing with me, the case study, but really helping to open our minds around
Yeah.
what is the art of the possible, with suppliers? And I think really importantly, where we've created this situation where there's a bit of a monopoly. Like I say, it may not be because a monopoly truly exists, but
Yeah.
because we've got commitments, we've got long-term commitments that are hard to extract ourselves from, and therefore we don't want to get into a battle of, a price battle, which
Right.
sours the relationship on both sides. But how can we kind of think a little bit differently about how to improve a relationship?
Yeah. You mentioned about souring the relationship, right? So one of the things that when you focus too much on aggressive cost cutting, I mean, there's a place and time for everything. I mean,
Yes.
if your company is going through an austerity mode
Yeah.
and the market, demands it, it's a different deal. But otherwise, if you only focus on that, um, you know, when external challenges happen, that's when you really start to feel the pinch. And COVID, for example,
Yeah.
it's a classic example.
Yeah.
Those who have beaten down suppliers versus those who had built a relationship with the
Mhm.
supplier.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not to necessarily say that every single every single circumstance that this is the approach that you would take,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
looking across your entire portfolio to figure out where I should be using different approaches versus, just trying to do the traditional cost saving levers, which are often power based, based
Right,
on leverage and power.
right. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, if anyone who's listening would like to reach out and connect with them, what I'll do is we'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile
Sure.
within the show notes for today's episode. The show notes will be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. Neji, one last time, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.